Traditional fingerings actually aim to facilitate the performance, so you try to find the easiest possible fingering in order to play a complicated phrase. But she says, please don't always use the easiest fingering, but use the fingering that is going to express your musical thought in the best way. Englishman actually followed Paganini, the very famous violin virtuoso, to many of his concerts and wanted to discover the secret behind his amazing virtuosity. So one day, this Englishman happened to be staying at a lodge in the room right next to Paganini. And the story goes, I don't know if it's true or not, that he drilled a hole into the wall so that he could actually see into the partition, so that he could see what Paganini was doing in the hours leading up to his concert. And what he saw was that Niccolò Paganini was... Hi everyone, this is Danae, and in today's video, I want to talk about the piano method that was developed by a French pianist. Her name was Mairel Jaëll, and I stumbled upon this method because I'm actually learning her second piano concerto right now. I will be performing it in a couple of weeks, and I must honestly say that I had never heard of Mairel Jaëll before. It was not a name that I knew, sadly. So of course, when I knew that I was playing this concerto, I started diving into everything that is connected to her, and I actually found out that she developed quite a renowned method called the Jaëll Method about piano playing. So today I wanted to dedicate my video to her method. Mairel Jaëll actually was very renowned by contemporaries such as Liszt, Saint-Saëns, César Franck, Fauré, and lived about a century ago. And after ending her career as a pianist herself, and she was also a composer, obviously, she started making scientific research and started focusing on the physio and psychological aspect of piano playing. She also worked very closely together with a doctor. The doctor's name was Charles Ferré, and together with him, she developed the Jaëll method, which at the time was actually very revolutionary. But I was actually personally very surprised to see that many of the points that she mentioned have actually now, in hindsight, been confirmed by neuroscientific research. So she was really ahead of her time and developed this revolutionary approach to piano playing. And today I wanted to share with you the main aspects of the Mairel Jaëll method of playing the piano. So if you're interested in that, then keep on watching. So first of all, the method was used for two different things. The first was the general, what was called musical awakening in young children. So when a young child started playing the piano, the method was used in order to enhance their first connection to music making and to piano playing. But also, and that was the main focus, it was used for high-level professional pianists and to enrich their experience of piano playing and to create a more complete experience when making music on this instrument. So what this method is based on is that the performer, so the pianist, feels two different sensations, and Mairel Jaëll puts these two sensations at the base of everything that she talks about. So one is what we hear, what we think. It happens in our head. She calls it the audible one, but it's also the mental one. And the second sensation is the sensation of touch. So what we feel and do with our hand. So there is the mental aspect and there is the physical touch aspect. And in her opinion, it is the basis of piano playing and of piano teaching to bond these two. So the mental aspect with the touch aspect, and to find a way for these two to work together as a team. Throughout her method, she describes in detail when it comes to describing the link between movement, finger movement, and musical thought. And she encourages every piano player to find the unity that exists between thought and sensation. On a technical level, she tries to find what she calls the true musical movement, because to her, the way we move our hands and our fingers is just simply a means in order to express what is happening mentally in our head, but also the way we move our fingers and our hands influences what we think in our head. So she very much says that there's an interdependence between the two. It's not our head that controls the fingers, but also our fingers and our movements that control the head and the mental aspect. So she says that there really is an interdependence between the two. And so she tries to find the true musical movement in which both come to play and in which both are presented from their best side. She uses a famous story in order to demonstrate that this thought process is actually one that has been done by famous artists. And there is this story that an Englishman actually followed Paganini, the very famous violin virtuoso, to many of his concerts and wanted to discover the secret behind his amazing virtuosity. So one day, this Englishman happened to be staying at a lodge in the room right next to Paganini. And the story goes, I don't know if it's true or not, that he drilled a hole into the wall so that he could actually see into the partition, so that he could see what Paganini was doing in the hours leading up to his concert. And what he saw was that Niccolò Paganini was simply lying on his bed, on his back, closed eyes, and just lay still for hours leading up to his concert, doing virtually nothing. And afterwards, the Englishman went to Paganini and confessed what he did and asked him to explain why he lay still on the bed. And Paganini actually told him that what he did during those hours was to actually visualize and mentally go through every single movement that he was about to do in his concert. So it basically was a mental representation of every movement that was about to happen in the performance. So obviously the thought of mental practice, as we would call it today, is not a thought that is new to us, but it seemed to have been kind of new at the time and kind of revolutionary at the time. And Mairel Jaëll was someone that believed that we should really at all costs prevent any automatic movement that just happens through repeating a piece and through repeating a passage, and always make sure that we focus on the consciousness of the creation of our movement. So now let's actually get into some of the concrete technical advice, because I think the general idea is now clear, the connection between the mental and the mechanical aspect, so to speak, and the true interdependence between it. But what does she actually advise that we should do in order to create that? So she starts off with a point that I find so great, that I love, because it's one that I also talk about a lot. She talks about how we actually press the key. And she says that she finds it very unnecessary for us to actually start here in order to press the key, but that we should simply only do what is necessary and just press the key the moment we're supposed to, not prepare it. So to me, this is what I like to call minimal movement. It's something that I talk about a lot in my videos. So I definitely agree with that. She says to only bring the finger with conscious thought to the key that we are about to play and avoid any other movements. She says that if we actually do indulge in doing this extra movement, it is a discrepancy between our musical thought and the movement that our finger is actually doing. That way, it prevents us from implementing the exact musical thought that we have in our minds. So again, she says the moment that we have to press the key, the finger goes on the key and presses it. And there is no other force that's being used. It's simply just pressing the key. However, a second movement has to come to place, which is to then lift the finger back up. And this is where she finds the difficulty lies, because if you press it and do no other movement and then only lift it back up, there is kind of a dead point, as she calls it, which is when the finger just rests immobile on the key and does nothing. And this is why she proposes a different technique. She proposes a circular movement. So I presume, of course, there are no videos showing what she thinks, but I presume that she means something like that. So we press it and then lift it back up in this circular movement. And this circular movement ensures a continuity of movement, a continuity of thought. And she says that this ensures that our musical thought is not interrupted by this mechanical movement of pressing, not moving, and then lifting. She says that this movement leads to a constant action when it comes to the musical movement, And it also ensures that we are in complete control, not only of the creation of the sound, but also of the extinction of the sound, of the dampening of the sound, because that way we can really know when we will lift up the key and stop the note from sounding. So this is one of the main technical things that she says, the circular movement when pressing a key, whenever it happens. Another thing that she talks about, which is a bit of a contradiction when it comes to what I often advise, but of course I still want to mention it here. She says that the relaxing of muscles, in her opinion, is not beneficial. So I know that if you have been watching my videos, you'll be thinking, what are you talking about? Because I always emphasize how important it is to relax everything at certain points in order to avoid any tension. Now, I just want to present her point first, and then I'll give you my opinion. So she says the relaxing is not beneficial, and there needs to be kind of a continuous tension when playing the piano and when pressing a key, when creating a sound. She says that the finger needs to be felt in an active way through the whole process of creating the sound and pressing the key. She also says that the constant activity and, so to speak, tension, although I'm sure she's not talking about actual negative tension, but just activated muscles in the hand, awakens our senses in the long run and actually also acts powerfully on our mental disposition when it comes to imagining the musical phrase that we're playing. In short, her quote is, "Attention is matched with muscular tension." So now, what do I think about this? Again, I am still a proponent of relaxing, like when you have a big chord, just relax your muscles. However, I have also read in your comments a couple of negative comments that have told me, well, this is not really true, you can't just relax your muscles. And some people have actually criticized this, and I think that actually ultimately we are talking about the same thing. I'm just phrasing it differently, because obviously when I press a key, there is a certain amount of tension that is still happening within my hand, because otherwise I wouldn't be making this movement. If I would be completely relaxed, I'd be like this. So I do understand her point that tension is kind of connected to the mental attention, and that once the tension is gone completely, that's when we will stop playing and stop having sound, stop creating sound. So I do understand this, but I do find it a little bit dangerous to say that we need to feel tension throughout an entire piece, because especially when we get into technically hard passages, this can actually be counterproductive. So I do understand her point. I would say that I actually agree with her point, because yes, there should be some type of tension, but I would say the right type of tension. Not tension here, for example, no tension that is painful, but just tension that creates attention, as she says. But please tell me your thoughts as well on this point, because that's something that some of you have disagreed with me in the past. So tell me what you think about that. I'll be very interested to read your comments. Another interesting thing that she says that I completely agree with is that immobility is a prerequisite for movement. And she says that it is very important that when a finger is not playing, it is not mobile, so it's immobile. And that is what I would say. I always call the other fingers are sleeping. I often say only have the finger that's actually playing in a technical exercise active, and the other fingers are sleeping, are completely relaxed. So I think that's what she also means when she says immobility is the prerequisite for movement. She also says it's important to not confuse it with idleness. So it's not like you're just lazy. It's just that you are creating maximum efficiency and are only creating movement where it is necessary. So she says resting the muscle is not the contrary of activating it, but resting the muscle is the contrary of moving it. And in connection with that, she also talks about gliding on the key. So there is the circular movement that I've already touched on. And then there's also a gliding motion on the key, which I completely agree with, because it does help to glide on the key from time to time, depending on what you're playing, and just slightly moving and repositioning your hand in order to facilitate the musical phrase. Another thing that she touches upon is the timbre and the sound color. She says that it is very important how we touch the key. Do we touch it with an almost flat finger with a large surface Do we touch it with a very round fingers, almost close to the nail, with a very small surface? So this obviously produces different types of sounds. I think that I've even made a video on that in the past, not knowing that this was part of her technique, where I actually talked about the difference between playing piano with round fingers versus playing piano with flat fingers. There's a lot of truth to that. When you have a beautiful musical phrase, I would definitely use more of a flat finger in order to create a resounding sound in a hall. Whereas if I have a quick virtuoso passage, I will definitely use very round fingers in order to create a very brilliant and precise sound. She also says that the use of finger surface, so that the varying finger surfaces that you can use, influence the dynamics, which again, I totally agree with. The last general point of her technique is about fingerings. And she says that traditional fingerings actually aim to facilitate the performance. So you try to find the easiest possible fingering in order to play a complicated phrase. But she says, please don't always use the easiest fingering, but use the fingering that is going to express your musical thought in the best way. And this point I find incredibly interesting. I think I have also touched on that in the past. Not sure that I have made a separate video on that, on fingerings, but I have talked about it in different pieces. So for example, there are moments when you will use like your thumb twice or 3 times, although you could probably easily play it with different fingers, but it is for musical reasons because you want to emphasize it. Or an example that comes to mind is Beethoven Tempest Sonata, where you want these 2 legato groups to always sound the same. So I always use 3-2, 3-2, 3-2, 3-2 instead of maybe doing 3-2-2-1 or 3-2-3-1, which could be easier. But there are fingerings that you can use for musical purposes and that are actually then also in a way helpful and facilitate your playing because they express your musical thought rather than just using the technically easiest way. She says that a fingering that stems from a musical thought rather than a technical one is what she would call a smooth fingering. And smooth can not necessarily mean the easiest fingering, but she would always try to look for the smooth fingering. So this was a summary, a very general overview of the so-called Jaëll method, Mairel Jaëll's ideas and thoughts on piano playing that are not just thoughts that she personally developed, but as I mentioned earlier, that she actually developed together with a doctor and that are founded upon research that she did with him and also many years of experience of being a pianist herself and a piano teacher. I really hope that you found this interesting. Let me know if you actually knew about her, if you had even heard about her method before this video, and of course also what you thought about the method, if you agree with it, or if there are certain points that you don't completely agree with. I find this very interesting. I was so excited to discover this method by a wonderful French female pianist and composer that I didn't really know before. So yes, let me know your thoughts. If you enjoyed this video, please leave it a like and subscribe to my channel. That would help me a lot. And I will see you again in my next video next week. Bye.